The pregnancy test glowed positive in my trembling hands, a tiny window to my future that should have brought pure joy. Instead, my phone buzzed with another anonymous message. "You don't deserve this baby. You'll never be good enough for this family." I'm Lila, and until 3 months ago, my life was beautifully ordinary. The local library where I worked had just promoted me to head of children's services. My husband Ryan and I had finally started trying for a baby. Even my mother-in-law Donna seemed to be easing up on her constant hints about grandchildren. "Have you taken it yet?" Ryan called through the bathroom door. Just give me a minute." I slipped the test into my pocket and deleted the message, adding it to the growing collection I hadn't told him about. The first one arrived the day after we announced we were trying for a baby. I opened the door to find Ryan's eager face. His blue eyes searched mine, hope radiating from every pore. "Well?" "It's positive." I forced a smile, letting him sweep me into his arms. Over his shoulder, I caught my reflection in the mirror. Pale, strained, nothing like the glowing mother-to-be I should have been. "Mom's going to flip," he laughed, already reaching for his phone. "Wait." I grabbed his wrist. "Can we just keep it between us for a while?" His face fell slightly. "She's been waiting for this forever, Lila. You know how important family is to her." That's exactly what worried me. Donna's version of family came with conditions, expectations, and judgment wrapped in sugary smiles. The messages started after our last dinner with her, where she'd cornered me in the kitchen. "A mother's love is fierce," she'd said, arranging cookies on a plate with surgical precision. "We do whatever it takes to protect our children. Remember that, dear." My phone buzzed again. Ryan was already calling his mother, his voice echoing through our small house. I checked the message. "You think you can handle motherhood? Wait until everyone knows what you really are." "Lila?" Ryan's voice snapped me back. "Mom wants to take us to dinner tonight to celebrate." "I haven't even made a doctor's appointment yet," I protested weakly. "She's already at that new French place downtown. Says she had a feeling today was special." He beamed, completely missing my discomfort. The restaurant was exactly Donna's style, all crystal chandeliers and starched tablecloths. She stood when we arrived, perfectly coiffed in her nurse's uniform. "I just got off shift," she explained, hugging Ryan tight before turning to me. "Lila, darling, you're looking tired." "Working hard," I mumbled, sliding into my seat. "Well, that will have to change now, won't it?" Her smile didn't reach her eyes. A mother's first priority is her child. My phone buzzed in my purse. I ignored it. "Have you thought about taking a break from the library?" Donna continued. "The first trimester is so delicate, all that dust and those germy children." "Mom!" Ryan warned, but she waved him off. "I'm just concerned. After what happened with Ryan's sister—" "Donna!" I cut in sharply. We never discussed Sarah's miscarriage. It was an unspoken rule. The waiter arrived with champagne. "Just sparkling cider for the mother-to-be," Donna trilled, and I excused myself to the bathroom. 3 new messages waited. Ask her about Sarah. Ask her what really happened. Ask her what she did. I stared at my phone, ice creeping through my veins. Only family knew about Sarah. Only family knew what happened 15 years ago when Donna was still working as a labor and delivery nurse. When I returned to the table, Donna was showing Ryan baby pictures on her phone. "You were such a perfect baby," she cooed. "We'll have to make sure everything is just as perfect this time." Her eyes met mine, and in that moment, I knew. The messages, the threats, the timing, it all led back to her. My mother-in-law was declaring war, and my baby was the battlefield. I smiled back, my hand protectively covering my stomach. Game on, Donna. Game on. The first ultrasound photo sat between Ryan and me at breakfast like a loaded gun. 3 sets of copies, one for us, one for the doctor's office, and one Donna had already claimed as her right. "She's redecorating the guest room," Ryan said, stirring his coffee. "Says it'll make the perfect nursery when we visit." I gripped my fork tighter. We live 15 minutes away. Why would we need a nursery at her house? Mom just wants to be involved. He reached for my hand, but I pulled away to check my phone. Another message waited. Mothers know best. Always have, always will. The cafe next door chimed its morning bell. Through the window, I watched Mike arrange his sidewalk tables, his movements precise and practiced. He caught my eye and waved, concern creasing his weathered face. I'd been avoiding his usual morning chats lately, unsure how much my face might betray. I need to set some boundaries with your mother, I said carefully. Ryan's spoon clinked against his cup. What kind of boundaries? She called my supervisor yesterday, tried to convince her I needed medical leave immediately. The memory made my jaw clench. Said the library environment wasn't safe for her grandchild. She means well. She's suffocating me. The words exploded louder than intended. Outside, Mike glanced our way again. Ryan pushed back from the table. You're being dramatic. This pregnancy has you emotional. Don't. I stood up, my chair scraping the floor. Don't you dare dismiss this as hormones. Then what is it? Because lately you jump every time your phone buzzes. You barely sleep. You won't let Mom help with anything. Help? Is that what you call this? I thrust my phone at him, opening the message thread. His eyes scanned the screen, brow furrowing. These are all from unknown numbers. Could be anyone. Read the one about Sarah. His face went slack. How? Who would know about that? Think, Ryan. Who's been obsessing over this pregnancy? Who worked at the hospital when Sarah lost her baby? Who keeps talking about making everything perfect this time? You can't seriously think, my mother. The doorbell rang. We both froze. Surprise! Donna's voice carried through the house. I brought nursery paint samples. Ryan shot me a warning look before calling out, In the kitchen, Mom! She breezed in, arms full of color swatches and fabric samples. Her nurse's uniform was immaculate as always, but something wild danced behind her eyes. I was thinking soft greens, she said, spreading everything across our breakfast table. So much more soothing than traditional pink or blue. We want everything calm and peaceful this time, don't we? My phone buzzed. Without looking, I knew another message waited. Actually, I said, standing straighter, we're not making any nursery decisions yet. It's too early. Donna's smile tightened. Nonsense. The first trimester is crucial for planning. Everything needs to be perfect before... Before what? I challenged. Before something goes wrong? Lila, Ryan warned. No, I want to know. Before what, Donna? She gathered her samples with trembling hands. I only want what's best for my grandchild. Some people aren't natural mothers. They need guidance. Like Sarah needed guidance? The color drained from her face. Ryan grabbed my arm, but I shook him off. Get out, I said quietly, and stop sending me messages. Messages? She laughed, but it sounded hollow. I don't know what you're talking about. Ryan, sweetheart, I think the pregnancy is affecting her judgment. Perhaps she should see someone. I said get out! Donna stepped back, clutching her samples to her chest. Ryan, you can't let her continue like this. Remember what Dr. Stevens said about stress during pregnancy? About how it can lead to complications? My blood ran cold. Dr. Stevens was my new obstetrician. I hadn't told anyone his name yet. How did you... I started, but Donna was already heading for the door. Just think about the paint samples, dear, she called back. Green is so soothing, so safe. After she left, Ryan wouldn't meet my eyes. I'll talk to her, he mumbled. She'll back off. But we both knew better. My phone buzzed one final time. Green walls won't save you. Ask Sarah about the nursery she never got to use. Mike's cafe became my refuge when the library felt too exposed. He never asked questions, just slid herbal tea across the counter and kept his voice low enough that conversations stayed private. Today, my best friend Zoe sat across from me, scrolling through the messages on my phone, her face growing darker with each swipe. This is straight-up stalking, she said, pushing the phone back. You need to show these to the police. And tell them what? That my mother-in-law might be sending anonymous threats? I wrapped my hands around the warm mug. Ryan already thinks I'm paranoid. Speaking of Ryan, Mike appeared with fresh scones, his eyes darting to the window. Through the glass, I saw Ryan's mother approaching the cafe, still in her nurse's uniform. Back door, Mike muttered, already moving to intercept her. Zoe and I slipped through the kitchen just as the bell chimed. Donna's voice carried through the walls. Have you seen my daughter-in-law? She's missed 2 prenatal vitamins appointments I scheduled. In the alley, I leaned against the brick wall, pulse racing. She's tracking my medical appointments now. Time to see someone professional, Zoe insisted. I know a therapist. I don't need therapy. I need proof. My phone buzzed with a new message. Running away won't protect the baby. Remember what happened when Sarah tried to hide? What happened to Sarah? Zoe asked, reading over my shoulder. Ryan's sister. She lost her baby 15 years ago when Donna was still working as a labor nurse. Nobody talks about it. Mrs. Reynolds might know something, Zoe said. She volunteers at the hospital archives. An hour later, we sat in Mrs. Reynolds's cramped office, surrounded by filing cabinets. She adjusted her glasses, frowning at the computer screen. There was an investigation, she said finally. Internal review of the maternity ward. Several incidents of unauthorized interventions in high-risk pregnancies. What kind of interventions? Records are sealed. But one nurse was suspended pending review. She resigned before... Mrs. Reynolds stopped, squinting at the screen. That's odd. The files have been accessed recently, multiple times from the hospital's internal system. My phone buzzed again. Digging up the past? Careful where you step. Some graves should stay buried. I showed Mrs. Reynolds the message. Her face paled. Get out of here, now, and watch your back. That evening, I found Ryan in his home office, surrounded by old photo albums. Mom dropped these off, he said without looking up. Said we should learn from family history. I picked up a photo. Sarah, heavily pregnant, looking anxiously over her shoulder. Behind her, barely visible in the background, stood Donna, watching. She was 8 months along, Ryan said softly. Everything was fine until... Until what? Mom was on shift that night. Said Sarah was showing signs of distress. She made the call to induce early. Something went wrong. The baby... He closed the album. Mom never forgave herself. Or Sarah, I added. Where is she now? Nobody knows. She left town right after. Mom says the grief broke her. My phone lit up. Sarah knew too much. Don't make her mistakes. Ryan saw the message. This has to stop. I'm calling Mom. Don't! I grabbed his arm. Think about it. The messages started when we announced the pregnancy. They mentioned Sarah, your mother's shifts, my doctor's appointments. Who else could know all that? You're saying my mother drove her own daughter away? That she's threatening you now? He stood up, shaking his head. Listen to yourself. I did some digging. There was an investigation at the hospital before she resigned. Something about unauthorized interventions in pregnancies. Enough! He slammed his hand on the desk. You need help, Lila. Professional help. Mom's right. This stress isn't good for the baby. Your mother's right? Of course. She's always right, isn't she? Just like she was right about Sarah's baby? The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, Ryan picked up his keys. I'm staying at Mom's tonight. Call me when you're ready to get help. After he left, one final message arrived with an old newspaper clipping. Sarah's story, local woman questions hospital procedures in late-term loss. The article was incomplete, but one quote stood out. Someone deliberately interfered. They thought they knew what was best. I touched my stomach, feeling the first flutter of movement. It's okay, I whispered. I won't let history repeat itself. My phone buzzed. Too late. History always repeats. Ask Dr. Stevens about his new orders for your care. Dr. Stevens' office felt different today. The same bland walls, the same medical posters, but now I noticed the fresh flowers on his desk, identical to the ones Donna always kept in her kitchen. Your mother-in-law has expressed concerns, he said, reviewing my chart. Given your family's history of complications. What family history? I kept my voice steady. though my nails dug into my palms. I've never had complications. Ah, he shifted uncomfortably. I meant your husband's family, the incident with Sarah. Who told you about Sarah? Before he could answer, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, then quickly turned it face down. I'm recommending bed rest, immediate medical leave from work. Just like Donna wanted, I left without taking his prescription, my phone already buzzing with a new message. Doctor's orders, for the baby's sake. Zoe was waiting in her car outside. Well? We need to move faster, I showed her the message. She's got the doctor in her pocket now. I might have something. Zoe pulled out her laptop. Remember that hospital investigation? I found Sarah. My heart stopped. Where? Portland. She's a social worker now, specializing in maternal trauma cases. Zoe turned the screen toward me, showing a professional headshot. Sarah's eyes held the same haunted look I'd seen in the old photo. She's giving a talk next week about medical abuse in pregnancy care. Book me a ticket. Already did. But Lila, Zoe hesitated. What if Ryan's right? What if we're seeing connections that aren't? My phone chimed with another message. This time, it was a photo of Sarah's speaking engagement poster, crossed out in red. Below it, history doesn't just repeat, it teaches lessons. I showed Zoe. Still think I'm imagining things? That night, I packed quietly while Ryan slept at his mother's. A soft knock at the door made me freeze. It's Mike, a voice whispered. I opened the door to find my neighbor looking grave. Donna was asking questions at the cafe today, about your schedule, your friends. She seemed different, agitated. Did she mention Sarah? No, but... He glanced over his shoulder. She was making calls about flight bookings to Portland. My phone lit up. Running to Big Sister won't save you, or the baby. I need a favor, I told Mike. If anyone asks, I'm taking a few days off for bed rest. Doctor's orders. He nodded, understanding. Be careful, Lila. Something's not right with that woman. Later, reviewing Sarah's social media, I found a pattern. Every few months, comments appeared from anonymous accounts. Remember what happens to mothers who don't listen. Some mistakes can't be fixed. Each post was followed by Sarah going offline for weeks. A new message arrived. Telling tales out of school? Tisk, tisk. Sarah learned the hard way about loyalty. I typed back for the first time. What did you do to her baby? The response came instantly. What any good mother would do, protected the family, like I'm protecting yours. My hands shook as I dialed Ryan's number. Straight to voicemail. I tried again. He's sleeping, Donna's voice answered. Dr. Stevens prescribed him something for the stress. Poor boy's worried sick about you. What did you give him? Just looking after my son, like I looked after Sarah, like I'll look after your baby. Stay away from my family. Oh, sweetheart. Her laugh sent chills down my spine. We are family. That's why I have to make sure everything's perfect this time. No mistakes, no disobedience, no running away. I ended the call and dialed Zoe. Change of plans, we leave tonight. What about Ryan? I touched my stomach, feeling the baby move. She's drugging him, like she probably drugged Sarah. I can't wait any longer. Lila, Zoe's voice dropped. Someone's watching your house. Black car, been there an hour. My phone buzzed one last time. Mothers know best. Always have, always will. Sweet dreams, dear daughter. I grabbed my bag, heading for the back door. It was time to find Sarah and end this, before Donna's version of perfect destroyed another family. The porch light flickered as I stepped out. In the shadows, a figure moved. Going somewhere? Donna asked softly. Without saying goodbye? The community center buzzed with excitement for the annual Pregnancy Wellness Fair. My display about children's literacy stood half-finished as I watched Donna work the room, her nurse's uniform pristine, her smile razor-sharp. She'd arranged this event, of course, the perfect stage for her performance. Everyone's so excited about your presentation, Zoe whispered, helping me arrange books. Are you sure about this? I touched the USB drive in my pocket containing Sarah's medical records. One PowerPoint slide was all it would take to expose Donna's past. It's time people knew the truth. Lila! Donna's voice carried across the room. Darling, you look flushed. Perhaps you should sit down. Before I could respond, Ryan appeared at my side. Mom's right. You don't look well. I'm fine. But the room did seem warmer, my vision slightly blurred. The water bottle Donna had insisted I drink sat half empty on the table. My phone buzzed. Mothers know when their children need rest. The text was from an unknown number, but the message next to it caught my eye. A notification that my presentation file had been altered 10 minutes ago. Ladies and gentlemen, Donna announced to the gathering crowd. Before my daughter-in-law's presentation, I have some concerns to share about maternal stress and its effects on pregnancy. I grabbed my laptop, but the screen swam before my eyes. The PowerPoint file opened to reveal not my carefully prepared exposé, but photos of me, following Dr. Stevens, digging through hospital records, meeting secretly with Zoe. The final slide showed my recent browser history, Sarah Morrison death records, pregnancy complications, suspicious deaths, how to prove medical malpractice. As you can see, Donna's voice seemed to echo. Sometimes the stress of pregnancy can lead to paranoid delusions, obsessive behavior, even dangerous accusations. The room spun. I clutched the podium as whispers rippled through the crowd. Ryan stared at the screen, his face pale. My own daughter, Sarah, suffered similar delusions, Donna continued, her voice thick with manufactured concern. She too made wild accusations. Tragic, how pregnancy hormones can affect the mind. Sarah's not dead, I managed to say, but my tongue felt heavy. She's in Portland. She knows what you did. Gasps from the audience. Ryan grabbed my arm. Lila, stop! You're not well! Ask her about the hospital investigation, I said louder, fighting the growing fog in my head. Ask her why she resigned. Ask her about the other mothers. Security? Donna called softly. I believe we need assistance. My daughter-in-law is having an episode. Through blurring vision, I saw Mike push through the crowd, his cafe apron still on. He'd seen the whole thing. He knew the truth. But when he reached me, his eyes were full of pity. Don't you see what she's doing? I pleaded to the shocked faces around me. She's trying to discredit me, like she did to Sarah, like she does to anyone who threatens her control. Shh, Ryan soothed, leading me away from the podium. We'll get you help. Mom knows a great facility. No! I wrenched away, stumbling. My phone clattered to the floor, screen lighting up with one final message. Perfect mothers know how to protect their children. From anything or anyone. The room tilted. As darkness crept in at the edges of my vision, I saw Donna approach with what looked like a medical bag. Her smile never wavered. Don't worry, dear, she whispered. I'll take care of everything, just like I always do. The last thing I heard was Ryan's voice, thick with worry. Mom, what was in that water bottle? Just something to help her rest, sweetheart. Trust, Mother. I know what's best. As consciousness faded, I realized my mistake. I'd tried to beat Donna at her own game, but she'd been playing a different one all along. This wasn't about exposing the truth. This was about making sure no one would ever believe it. The darkness took me, but not before I heard Donna's final words to the murmuring crowd. Sometimes the greatest act of love is protecting someone from themselves. Isn't that right, Sarah? Through the haze, I thought I saw a familiar face in the back of the room. A woman with haunted eyes, watching silently. Then nothing. The psychiatric facility's walls were the same shade of green Donna had chosen for the nursery. 3 days since the episode at the wellness fair, and already the world had shifted on its axis. I sat in the common room, watching other patients shuffle past in identical robes, wondering how many of them had also crossed paths with women like Donna. Your husband's here, the nurse announced. Not my nurse. Donna had made sure to get herself assigned to my case, but she was mysteriously absent today. Ryan looked exhausted, his suit wrinkled. The doctor says you're not taking your medication. Because I'm not sick. I kept my voice steady, remembering Dr. Emily's warning about appearing too emotional. Where's your mother? Called away for an emergency at her old hospital. He wouldn't meet my eyes. Something about old records being requested. My heart jumped. Sarah, it had to be. The woman I'd glimpsed at the fair wasn't a hallucination. Have you checked your phone? I asked carefully. Any strange messages? Mom took my phone, said I needed space to process. He rubbed his face. The things you said at the fair about Sarah. Mom finally told me everything. The delusions, the accusations, how she tried to hurt herself. That's not what happened. I leaned forward. Sarah's alive. She's in Portland. She's trying to expose what your mother did. Stop! Ryan stood up. Just stop. Please take the medication, for the baby's sake. After he left, I noticed a folded paper had fallen from his pocket. A hospital form, partially visible. Request for guardian ad litem, Unborn Child Protection Act. My hands shook as I read. Donna was seeking legal guardianship of my unborn child. Quite a bind you're in. The voice came from behind me, an elderly patient I'd seen in group therapy. Reminds me of my daughter-in-law, always making wild claims about my parenting. Until the accident, of course. I turned slowly. The woman's smile was familiar. Her eyes held the same calculated warmth as Donna's. You're Helen Crawford, I whispered. The name from the hospital records. Another nurse who'd resigned during the investigation. Donna said you were clever. She sat beside me. We worked so well together, protecting mothers from themselves. Sometimes love requires intervention. My phone privileges had been revoked, but I'd memorized Zoe's number. At the patient phones, I dialed with trembling fingers. Zoe's away, Mike's voice answered. Left town suddenly. Something about a graphic design emergency in Portland. Relief flooded through me. She'd gone to find Sarah. Tell her, I started, but Helen appeared beside me. Time for group, she said pleasantly. We're discussing maternal instincts today. In group therapy, Helen led the session. Each story followed the same pattern. Difficult daughters-in-law, necessary interventions, tragic accidents. The other patients nodded sympathetically, but their eyes were vacant, medicated. Back in my room, I found a new message scratched into my bedside table. Sarah says hello. Better take your medicine. That night, Donna returned for her shift. She hummed as she prepared my injection. Sarah's quite upset about your accusations. Had to be sedated again. Such a shame. You found her. I always know where my children are. She smiled. Now this might pinch a bit. I backed away. The baby will be perfectly safe with me, just like you will be once you accept my help. Her voice hardened. Don't fight it, Lila. Look around. No one believes you. Even Ryan signed the guardianship papers. Why? Why do this? Because mothers know best. Always. She advanced with the needle. Sarah learned that. Helen's daughter-in-law learned that. And you will too. A commotion erupted in the hallway. Donna turned, annoyed at the interruption. Mrs. Stevens? A nurse called. Emergency call from Portland. Donna's face tightened. Give me 5 minutes to finish here. It's about Sarah. She's gone public. The needle clattered to the floor. For the first time, I saw real fear in Donna's eyes. But as she hurried out, she paused at the door. Mothers protect their children, Lila. Whatever it takes. Remember that when you wake up. I glanced at my water cup, understanding too late why it tasted bitter. As darkness crept in, I saw Helen enter the room, picking up the fallen needle. Sweet dreams, dear, she cooed. Don't worry, we'll take good care of both of you. The last thing I heard was Donna's voice down the hall. Find Sarah, now! The hospital chapel smelled of stale incense and secrets. Donna knelt in the front pew, her nurse's uniform replaced by a simple black dress. She didn't turn when I entered, though her shoulders tensed. Sarah's press conference starts in an hour, I said, my voice echoing off stone walls. Funny timing, you being here. Mothers always return to the scene of their greatest sacrifices. She remained facing the altar. Did you know I lost my first child here? 3rd trimester? The nurses were incompetent. Is that why you became one? To do better? To do what's necessary? She finally turned. How did you get out? Helen's not as careful as you. She talks in her sleep. I touched my stomach, still queasy from the drugs, especially about what happened to her daughter-in-law. A smile flickered across Donna's face. You've grown stronger. Good. The baby needs a strong mother. Like Sarah was strong? Sarah was weak. She wouldn't listen, wouldn't understand that sometimes love means making impossible choices. Donna stood, smoothing her dress. But you're different. You fight back, like I did. Through the stained glass, red light painted her face like blood. My phone buzzed, Zoe's signal that Sarah was ready. Tell me about your first baby, I said softly. The one you lost. Something cracked in Donna's expression. The nurses, they said I was too controlling, that my anxiety was hurting the baby. They sedated me. When I woke up, her hands clenched. I promised myself no mother would ever feel that helpless again. So you became the one in control, deciding which mothers were worthy, which babies needed protection. I stepped closer. How many, Donna? How many families did you destroy? I saved them! Her composure shattered. Weak mothers make weak children. Sarah didn't understand that. She would have ruined my grandchild with her softness, just like you would ruin yours. Sarah's baby didn't die, did it? The truth hit like lightning. You took it. Donna's laugh was hollow. Adopted, officially. A lovely couple in Portland. Sarah was declared unfit. Postpartum psychosis, they called it. The same diagnosis you have, dear. My phone buzzed again. In 15 minutes, Sarah would tell her story to the world. But there was one piece missing. Where are the records? I asked. The real ones, not the falsified versions. Safe. Unlike you. She reached into her purse. I had such hopes, Lila. We could have been perfect together, but you're just like Sarah, too stubborn to accept help. The syringe caught the red light. The baby will be better off without your influence. Ryan understands that now. Does he understand this? I held up my phone, playing the recording of her confession. Or should I forward it to the press first? Her hand trembled. You wouldn't dare. Try me. I touched my stomach again. I learned from the best, after all. Mothers do whatever it takes, right? She lunged with the syringe. I sidestepped, letting her momentum carry her past me. She stumbled, catching herself on the altar. It's over, Donna. Sarah's alive. Her baby's alive. And everyone's about to know what you did. No. She straightened, something feral in her eyes. No one will believe you. You're just another unstable mother, like Sarah, like all the others. Except I'm not alone. The chapel doors opened. Ryan stood there, his face ashen, holding his phone. Behind him, Helen waited in handcuffs, flanked by police. Mom! Ryan's voice cracked. What did you do to Sarah? Donna's mask crumbled completely. I protected our family. Everything I did was for... Save it for the press conference, I cut in. Sarah's waiting to reunite with her child. Your perfect family is about to get very public. As they led her away, Donna turned back one last time. You'll understand someday, she whispered. When the baby comes. Sometimes love looks like madness. I watched her disappear into the red light, one hand on my stomach, the other holding Ryan's trembling fingers. I already understand, I murmured. Love looks like truth. The courtroom emptied slowly, leaving behind the hollow echo of justice served. 15 years of Donna's crimes laid bare, each victim's story more haunting than the last. Sarah sat 2 rows behind me, clutching her teenage son's hand, a boy with Ryan's eyes and her quiet strength. Mike appeared with coffee from his cafe. Thought you might need this. Thanks. I watched Ryan lingering by the prosecutor's table, shuffling papers that didn't need shuffling. Did you read it? The letter? Yeah. He settled beside me. Donna always did have perfect handwriting. The envelope had arrived this morning, just before sentencing. Inside, a single page held more truth than months of testimony. Perfect mothers don't exist. I see that now. We're all just echoes of our own wounds, trying not to pass them down. Take care of our grandchild, Lila. Love them better than I knew how. She's being transferred tonight, Ryan said, finally joining us. His tie hung loose, defeat etched in every line of his face. Mom asked to see the baby first. No. The word came automatically, my hand covering my stomach. Just once. Before what? Before she finds another way to control us? The baby kicked, as if in agreement. Some wounds don't deserve second chances. Sarah approached, her son hovering protectively nearby. She wants to see my Jack, too. Says she needs closure. What did you tell her? That closure isn't always a gift we give others. Sarah's smile held years of hard-won wisdom. Sometimes it's a door we close ourselves. Through the courthouse windows, reporters gathered on the steps, hungry for the story of the nurse who stole babies in the name of perfect motherhood. Helen had already pleaded guilty, trading testimony for a lighter sentence. 3 more former nurses had come forward, confessing to similar crimes at other hospitals. I should feel something more, Ryan said quietly. Anger, relief, something. You feel what you feel, I replied, remembering Dr. Emily's words about healing. That's enough. My phone buzzed, not with threatening messages now, but with updates from the survivors group Sarah had started. Women sharing stories, breaking silences, reclaiming their power one truth at a time. Ready? Zoe waited by the door, camera in hand. The documentary was her idea, a record of recovery, not revenge. Almost. I turned to Ryan. Your mother's letter. She wrote something else, about her first baby. He stiffened. What? There was no baby. The pregnancy was a lie she told herself so long. It became her truth. Everything else, Sarah, the other mothers, me, it all stemmed from that first deception. How can you be sure? Because perfect mothers don't exist, I echoed Donna's words. But perfect lies do. Outside, Sarah hugged her son close, whispering something that made him smile. 15 years of separation hadn't broken their bond. It had transformed it into something stronger, more resilient. I've been thinking about names, Ryan said suddenly. For the baby. Not Sarah, I said quickly. Or Donna. No. He took my hand. Something new. Something that's just ours. The baby kicked again as we descended the courthouse steps. Reporters called out questions. Cameras flashed, but their voices seemed distant, unimportant. In my pocket, Donna's letter crinkled, her last attempt at controlling the narrative. But our story wasn't hers to write anymore. It belonged to Sarah's quiet strength, to Ryan's painful growth, to the child growing beneath my heart, who would never know the weight of perfect expectations. One last thing, I told the others. Taking out the letter, I ripped it slowly, deliberately, letting the pieces scatter like confetti on the courthouse steps. Sarah nodded, understanding. Her son squeezed her hand. Some mothers protect, I said, watching the paper fragments dance away. Others control. The trick is knowing the difference. The setting sun painted the courthouse gold, transforming the scene into something almost beautiful. Not perfect, never perfect, but real. And in the end, that was the greatest victory of all.
Mom, I'm home. Standing before me as I was working in the garden was my daughter who should have died at the age of 6. 5 years ago, I was seriously injured in a car accident along with my daughter. I couldn't even get out of bed, let alone attend my daughter's funeral. That's why I couldn't say goodbye and was plunged into deep sorrow for a long time. I stood there dumbfounded, wondering if I was seeing a vision. As I was too shocked to speak, my grown daughter began to reveal a shocking truth. Actually, at that time, After hearing her story, I decided to send that person to hell. My husband Ian started a company after marrying me. When he first started the business, I was struggling to manage the mortgage and living expenses. Of course, I economized on food, clothing, and household goods wherever I could, supporting him with all my might. During that time, our daughter Sophia was born, and though it was tough, we spent happy days together. After about 4 years, my husband's business started to take off, and we gradually had a little more financial breathing room. It's all thanks to you. Thank you. I was genuinely happy to hear his words of gratitude, and I felt I could work even harder. My hobby at that time was gardening, and my daughter always helped me water the plants. Sophia was bright, honest, and a very lovely daughter I was proud of. The time we spent together in the garden under the warm sunlight was our special moment. However, that happiness didn't last long. I started to feel lonely at home around the time Sophia turned 6. My husband's spending habits became extravagant, and he started coming home late more often. Sometimes I could smell women's perfume on the suits he asked me to take to the dry cleaners. I tried to convince myself that he had to socialize with business partners, but the uneasy feeling wouldn't go away. One day, after dropping my daughter off at kindergarten and catching my breath, I received a phone call from my husband. I forgot some documents I need for a meeting today. Bring them to the office right away. His voice sounded unusually flustered. Okay, where are the documents? They should be in the drawer of my desk in my room. It's a blue file. Hurry up and bring it. The call ended before I could even respond. I felt irritated by my husband's arrogant attitude. As his work got on track and his income increased, Ian changed. Until Sophia was about 2 years old, no matter how busy he was, he would take her to the park on weekends or play with her. Before, even on ordinary days, he would often buy clothes, stuffed animals, or toys to please our daughter. However, he gradually started going out on weekends with various excuses and stopped being involved in childcare altogether. Moreover, he began to say terrible things like, "Who do you think you're able to live thanks to?" or, "If you have any objections, say them after you earn as much as I do." I found the documents in my husband's desk drawer and headed to Ian's company. Later, I went out to buy a school bag for Sophia, who was about to start elementary school. She was so adorable, looking at various colorful bags and asking, "Mom, how about this one? Does it suit me?" I couldn't help but smile, forgetting all my complaints about my husband as we spent a lovely time together. The light purple bag with the lace-like pattern was cute. But the pink bag with the embroidery was lovely too. On the bus ride home, I smiled at the sight of my daughter sitting with her arms folded, pondering with a serious face. It's hard to decide, isn't it? We still have time, so you can think about it carefully. Yes. I'll find my absolute favorite. After that, we got off the bus at our usual stop, and when we were about 5 minutes away from home, I suddenly heard the loud engine sound of a sports car in the distance. When I turned around, I saw a car speeding towards us. I couldn't even scream, all I could do was instinctively hug Sophia. I heard the screams of passers-by, and the next moment, I felt an incredible impact on my body before losing consciousness. The next time I opened my eyes, I was in a hospital bed. I saw a white ceiling and it took me a while to understand that I wasn't at home. We were looking at bags on our way home, then a car came towards us, and then my whole body ached just from breathing, and I could barely move, but all I could think about was my daughter's safety. I pressed the nurse call button, enduring the pain, and soon a nurse and doctor came running, saying they would contact Ian. Apparently, I had been asleep for 3 days. 30 minutes later, when he arrived at the hospital and entered the room, he looked at me and muttered, "So you're alive," then let out a sigh. "What about Sophia?" I asked my husband in a hoarse voice as he came to the side of the bed. By the time I got to the hospital, she was already. He told me without making eye contact, seeming to look off into the distance. When the ambulance arrived, my daughter was already in critical condition and treatment didn't help in time. No. Although I understood the meaning of his words, I was too shocked to even cry. It didn't feel real, as if I was having a bad dream. And while I was in the hospital, Sophia's funeral had already been completed. A month after the accident, when I was discharged and returned home, the house was eerily quiet. There was only a smiling photo of Sophia in the living room. Unable to see my daughter's final moments, I was consumed by deep despair. In the depths of my despair, I couldn't do anything and spent my days just crying. I even lost all interest in gardening, which I had loved so much. Why don't you try to look forward already? Sophia won't rest in peace if you keep being like this. My husband's words, sounding exasperated, reached my ears, but I couldn't accept them. I couldn't even imagine how to live a life without my daughter. That's impossible. No matter what I did or where I went, the hole in my heart couldn't be filled. I kept remembering how my daughter used to help me with cooking, folding laundry, and watering the garden, and tears would involuntarily flow. Perhaps disgusted by my state, Ian started spending more nights away from home. About 5 years after losing my daughter, my heart had recovered enough to engage in my old hobby of gardening. Who would have thought that nurturing plants could be so healing? Sophia used to help me water the plants too. There were many moments in my daily life when I would suddenly remember Sophia, but I no longer cried uncontrollably like before. I was gradually overcoming the past and starting to think about the future. On one such day, just before noon, I was out in the garden taking advantage of the good weather, rearranging flower pots while considering different combinations. That's when I heard a sound from the door connecting the parking lot to the garden. Who could it be? When I looked up, there stood my daughter who was supposed to have died 5 years ago. She had grown into a young woman, but I could still see traces of the Sophia I remembered. "Mom, I'm home," she called out hesitantly, and I was too surprised to say anything. I just stared at her in amazement, unable to move, wondering if I was dreaming or seeing some kind of illusion. "How?" That was all I could say after a while. "Mom, listen carefully. Actually, the shocking truth my daughter told me filled me with a rage I had never felt before. Everything had been orchestrated by Ian. Unforgivable. I decided to send my husband to hell. From now on, I would live for Sophia's happiness. I vowed not to cry anymore. A few weeks later, Ian was unusually spending his day off at home. "Honey, can I talk to you for a moment? Can you explain this?" I placed several photos in front of him as he was lounging on the sofa watching TV. They showed my husband entering various houses and supermarkets with an unknown woman. "What are these?" "I took them while following you. I've been suspecting you of having an affair because you've been coming home late or not coming home at all more often." He picked up the photos and laughed scornfully. "Since Sophia died, you've been moping around with a gloomy face every day, right? It's only natural not to want to come home when I see that." He tapped the photos with his finger and said brazenly, "This house is a place I'm renting near the office for work. That woman is the housekeeper. So of course she's going in and out of the house." "I see." Seeing my meek attitude, my husband grinned confidently. "Those photos don't prove anything." He crossed his arms and leaned back, seemingly emboldened. "Well, that might be fine, but..." Just as my husband looked puzzled by my words, my cell phone rang loudly. I answered the phone without any explanation. "What now? Is this conversation over?" As he spoke irritably, I showed him the video call screen, and his face changed instantly. "Hello, Mom. I had asked Sophia to call me." "Huh? What's going on?" "Actually, when she came to visit me, she had a smartphone hanging around her neck. She told me that Ian was managing her cell phone. So, I came up with the idea of registering Sophia's and my numbers under fake names in each other's phones, without Ian knowing, and asked for my daughter's cooperation. I might have forgiven you for the affair, but I can't forgive you for lying about Sophia's death. I want you to confess everything." Faced with the intensity of my daughter on the phone and me, my husband involuntarily stood up and stepped back. I could see his eyes darting around, clearly agitated. What Sophia had told me that day was unforgivable. When we had the accident, I was severely injured and taken to a hospital with an intensive care unit, but due to capacity issues, my daughter was taken to a different hospital. Ian had lied to me saying, "Our daughter died," and to Sophia saying, "Mom died." Furthermore, around the time our daughter was discharged, my husband rented a house in the neighboring town, saying, "It's better to be closer to the hospital for Sophia's rehabilitation." Sophia told me that soon after, a woman started living with you. You told Sophia she was an acquaintance of yours who would take care of her, didn't you? As I questioned him, sweat began to bead on my husband's forehead. "That's right. I thought Sophia would be lonely if she was alone for long periods, so I hired that housekeeper in the photo. But that's strange, isn't it, Sophia?" I asked, looking at my daughter's face through the screen. "Yes. Because Stephanie, who Dad brought as a housekeeper, says mean things like she's going to marry Dad and that I'm in the way." Apparently, Stephanie, who started living in the same house, always came home late at night and was asleep when Sophia left for school. My daughter would prepare her own breakfast and go to school, and by the time she returned home, Stephanie would leave for work. Stephanie didn't do any housework at all, and although Ian sometimes brought food home, Sophia ended up doing most of the housework herself. When Dad wasn't around, Stephanie told me to tell you to get a divorce quickly. That's when I started to think that maybe Mom was still alive. My daughter had come to check on me by herself, taking trains and buses, asking passers-by for directions along the way. I don't want to live with that person anymore. As Sophia pleaded with a face on the verge of tears, my heart ached. Dad has been lying to me all this time, saying that Mom was dead. I can't trust Dad anymore. Thinking about how much she must have endured living like that, I felt that I absolutely couldn't let her suffer anymore. Pushed by my daughter's words, I took out more photos. I have these too. They showed Ian and Stephanie walking arm in arm, entering pubs and hotels. The stores in those photos were the same ones I had seen on a business card that fell out of his suit jacket pocket when he once asked me to take it to the dry cleaners. Stephanie works at this store, doesn't she? My husband's eyes widened at those words. You've been betraying me and having an affair since 5 years ago. I glared at Ian as I said this. His face turned red as he realized his lies had been exposed, and he started trembling. Suddenly, he slammed his fist on the table and crumpled the photos in his hand. Startled by his sudden action, I stiffened, and my enraged husband threw the photos at me. Call the police. Feeling threatened by Ian's behavior, I pleaded with my daughter and ended the call. What? Don't be ridiculous. Everything's ruined because you two are alive. My husband, now in a frenzy, approached me with a look I had never seen before. I was supposed to send you both to the other world and live happily with Stephanie. Stunned by his unexpected words, I was at a loss. It turns out that the accident Sophia and I had been in was not an unfortunate incident. Apparently, he had hired an acquaintance of Stephanie's to run us over with a car. When we were seriously injured but our lives were not in danger, he was forced to change his plans and ended up living a double life between our home and his mistress's house. Of course, the story about having completed our daughter's funeral was also a lie. If you two had died in the accident as planned, I would have gained sympathy from everyone around me and even collected the insurance money. My husband's face contorted as he clenched his fists. Too bad your plan didn't work out. I can't live with you anymore. I've already consulted a lawyer, and you're going to pay alimony and child support properly. Enraged by my words, he actually picked up the remote control from the table and threw it at me. As I dodged it, the remote hit the wall with a loud bang. Just as Ian shouted, "Don't run away," and grabbed a vase, we heard the sound of sirens in the distance. Suddenly panicked, he looked out the window and started to get flustered. Did you really call the police? Is Sophia planning to turn me in? Ian's face turned pale. Please, don't do this. Don't do this. I'll lose everything, my company, Stephanie, everything. Think hard about what you've done while you're in prison. Disgusted that even in this situation he didn't mention my or our daughter's names, I coldly declared. As footsteps approached and police officers entered the room, a panicked Ian actually threw the vase he was holding at them. Stay back. Stop. The officers skillfully restrained my husband, who resisted violently until the very end. Thanks to our daughter's report and her actions, he was taken away. After that, I divorced Ian and received a lump sum payment of $300,000 for alimony, child support, and division of property. His company was in an uproar the day after his sudden arrest. I received numerous phone calls, but I simply stated the facts calmly. Ian ended up losing everything, his family and his social credibility. He must be regretting his actions now. But even if he realizes it's too late to make amends, it's already over for him. I moved with my daughter and started a new job, beginning our new life. I feel happy every day knowing that my daughter is there when I come home. We're having macaroni and cheese for dinner tonight, I said as I set the table, and Sophia beamed, saying, "Yay." Such ordinary conversations and my daughter's smile are my greatest treasures. How could this happen to Mom? I had returned to my childhood home after a long time, only to find my mother's skeletal remains in the garden. According to the police investigation, she had been dead for over a month. However, this was hard to believe because I had been in contact with her until just the day before. So who was I exchanging emails with? In the midst of my confusion, I found my mother's diary. When I learned the terrifying truth written in it, I trembled with fear and anger. I had only ever seen my father's face in photographs. "Your father passed away in an accident when you were 1 year old," my mother often told me when I was little. I grew up in a single-parent household, but my mother worked tirelessly to put me through college. She was reserved yet strong and kind, my role model and emotional support. My husband, Pete, knew this and respected her, always treating her kindly. Pete was my college classmate, and we got married when I was 26. We started our life about a 2-hour drive from my childhood home. However, my mother, who had been overworking herself for decades, began to fall ill frequently and often had to take time off work. "Mom, why don't you come live with us? It would put my mind at ease." "My husband says it's fine too." "That's very kind of you, but I prefer living alone." "It's more comfortable for me," she replied with an apologetic look, gently refusing my offer. I could understand her feelings, but as her daughter, I couldn't help but worry. So, at my suggestion, we started communicating almost daily. My mother wasn't tech-savvy and even struggled with emails, so we always talked on the phone. Hearing her voice every day was a comforting moment for me, living apart. Of course, I wanted to see her face sometimes, but due to my busy work schedule, I could only visit her about once a month. To make up for this, my husband would help out when he could. "If you can't make it, I'll go check on her." "Don't worry," he'd say. "Thank you so much. It's a big help. Your mother is important family to me too." Saying this, he would visit her from time to time without complaint. My husband was kind, but he had a bit of a problem with money management that worried me. He would buy things without considering the price or consulting me. We had argued about this many times, but his spending habits didn't improve, so I had to restrict his allowance. However, one day, I was shocked when I saw the credit card statement. Why is the bill so high? It's over $1,000. Oh, that's, Pete stammered, hanging his head. This defeats the purpose of setting an allowance. What did you spend it on? Well, the other day when I went out drinking with friends, I ended up treating them. What? You can't afford to pay for others. I raised my voice in anger without thinking. I'm really sorry. It won't happen again. My husband seemed to reflect on his actions and swore he would never waste money again, so I decided to forgive him. However, less than a month later, that promise was broken. This time, he had used our joint savings without my knowledge. I really needed the money, he said. That's the worst. How could you touch our savings? I'm sorry. I'll put it back when I get my next paycheck. My husband apologized, but he didn't seem very remorseful. This really upset me. That's enough. If this continues, I'll divorce you. When I said this in the heat of the moment, my husband suddenly became flustered. No, please don't do that. I'll really change from now on and be more responsible. He apologized repeatedly, almost in tears. There won't be a next time. But I haven't forgiven you yet. It depends on your actions from now on. I decided this would be the last time I'd turn a blind eye, and I declared this to him. I thought he might repeat the same behavior soon, but if he did, I'd leave him without question. After that, Pete started consulting me even for small purchases. Not only that, but he also began to help more with housework and became even more attentive to my mother's well-being, showing a very dedicated attitude. Since then, we had no more money problems and lived peacefully. However, about 4 years into our marriage, something strange happened with my mother. I've caught a cold and lost my voice, so please communicate by email for a while. I received an email from her. What? How? I was surprised by this sudden change, as she had never been able to use email properly despite my many attempts to teach her. But given the content, I became worried. Are you all right? Should I come over now? I don't have a fever, and I don't want to risk giving you a cold, so you don't need to come. The replies came faster than I'd expect from my technophobe mother, which made me even more uneasy. Something felt off. I wanted to go to her house right away, but I was in the busiest period at work and couldn't find the time. Should I go check on her instead? My husband offered. Would you? I'm sorry to always rely on you, but that would be a great help. I thanked my husband for his offer and asked him to go. The next day, he visited my mother. When I returned from work, he reported, her throat seemed to be in bad shape, but otherwise she was fine. This put me a little at ease. But I hadn't been there in a while myself, so I decided I'd go see her face as soon as work settled down. Several weeks passed, and as the hot summer was coming to an end, there was a distinct feeling of autumn in the air, especially in the mornings and evenings. I was still only communicating with my mother via email, which made me feel somewhat lonely. My work had finally passed its peak busyness, and I unexpectedly got an afternoon off, so I decided to go visit my mother after a long time. I'll surprise her by showing up without notice, I thought. When I arrived at her house and rang the doorbell, there was no response. There didn't seem to be anyone home, so thinking she might be out, I used my spare key to enter and wait for her return. The house seemed dusty, as if it had been closed up for a long time, so I opened all the windows. Then, as I glanced towards the garden, I noticed that part of her vegetable patch, which was her gardening hobby, had been disturbed. Huh? Why is only that part messy? When I went out to the garden, I saw traces of digging in one specific area. Curious, I decided to dig there myself. To my horror, I uncovered a skeleton. Aita! I screamed, collapsing in fear. Shaking uncontrollably, I immediately called the police using my phone. While waiting for the police to arrive, I fearfully looked at the remains again and noticed something familiar buried with them. It was the necklace I had given my mother for Mother's Day. No, why is this here? Although I didn't want to believe it, the worst-case scenario flashed through my mind. Is this Mom? Faced with this unacceptable reality, I felt as if my body was slowly sinking into a deep swamp. 10 minutes later, the police arrived and began investigating the garden. Allison. Are you okay? My husband, whom I had contacted, also arrived, and we were questioned about the situation. We told them that my husband was the last person to see my mother and that I had been exchanging emails with her until the day before. The police seemed puzzled by this information. According to the condition of the bones, she had been dead for over a month. Moreover, they couldn't find my mother's cell phone anywhere. But I was emailing with my mother. She was even considerate of how busy I was with work. Allison, that's enough. It's okay. I was in such shock that I couldn't think straight and could only cry. From that point on, my husband took care of all the preparations for my mother's funeral, while I felt like I was in a dreamlike state. Before I knew it, the funeral was over. Thinking I should organize my mother's belongings, I started visiting her house every day. While cleaning out her dresser, I found a letter-sized box. Oh, how nostalgic! Inside were drawings I had made of my mother when I was little, letters, and presents, all carefully preserved. I was touched that she had treasured these things, and as I picked up the contents of the box to look at other items, I noticed a relatively new notebook at the very bottom. It appeared to be my mother's diary. Wanting to know more about her recent life, I hesitantly turned the pages, only to find something unbelievable written there. What? This can't be true. Learning the horrifying truth, I felt a rage unlike anything I had ever experienced before. I'll never forgive this. Determined to corner the culprit who had tormented my mother and done this to her, I began preparing my revenge. 2 days later, when both my husband and I had a day off work, he took me out for a walk. "I'm just glad you're in the mood to get some fresh air," he said. Yes, I suppose so. My husband was happy that we were going out together after I had been depressed about my mother for so long. I'm a bit tired. Shall we have some tea? We decided to enter a nearby cafe. The interior had a few businessmen and groups of middle-aged women scattered about. My husband chose a window seat, and we sat facing each other. What would you like to drink? I think I'll have a float. His eyes sparkled as he chose from the menu, like a child. Hey, I have something I want to talk about. Will you listen? I said to him. What is it? What's wrong? He asked, meeting my gaze. Well, you see, I've been wondering about something regarding my mother. How is it possible that I was emailing her the day before she was found, when she had been dead for over a month? Well, maybe the killer was pretending to be her and replying to delay the discovery. He seriously shared his theory. Of course, that was the first thing I had considered too, but there were several things that didn't add up. But isn't it strange that one of the emails mentioned wanting to go back to the spa we all went to before? Only the three of us knew about that spa trip, right? Well, that's true. But couldn't it just be a coincidence, he said. As I muttered, I wonder, he nodded while sipping his float. However, he seemed somewhat flustered. Look at this, I said, taking out a document from my bag and placing it in front of him. Mom seems to have been sick. I found this while cleaning out her things. It was a medical diagnosis. I hadn't known about it until I saw it, but my mother had an illness that required treatment. Did you know about this? I asked. No, I didn't, he replied. I see. When I called the hospital to confirm, they said my mother had stopped coming for appointments at some point. It seemed she even quit her treatment midway. My husband crossed his arms, appearing to be deep in thought. Maybe she had her reasons, he suggested. Like not being able to afford the treatment costs. I ventured. Ugh, maybe. But there's no point in thinking about that now, is there? He looked troubled and gradually became more restless. I stared at him directly. You borrowed money from my mother, didn't you? Of course not. Why would I? Although he denied it verbally, he was clearly panicking. I want you to be honest. The truth is, you borrowed over $20,000 from my mother, didn't you? As I pressed further, my husband, either angry or defensive, stood up and slammed the table. How dare you suspect me? You're out of your mind to suddenly say such things without any evidence. Maybe you're the one who's a bit tired. My husband's aggressive voice instantly drew the attention of everyone in the cafe. Realizing this, he apologized and sat down, lowering his voice. The other customers quickly looked away, but they seemed interested in our conversation and were stealing glances while trying to eavesdrop. I do have evidence, I said. To his surprise, I placed a notebook in front of him. It was my mother's diary that I had found while cleaning her house. What's that supposed to mean? He asked, confrontationally, as if he was on guard about something. I turned the pages and read aloud what was written there. The diary detailed how Pete had been threatening my mother and extorting money from her, along with the exact amounts. Moreover, you threatened to hurt me and ruin my life if she didn't lend you money? That's despicable. It seemed that when my mother said she couldn't lend any more money because of her treatment costs, my husband had told her, "What's the point of living so long? It's just a waste of money." Furthermore, He had forced her to choose between her own body and her daughter, making her give up on treatment while continuing to ask for money. All of this was written in this notebook. Explain what this means, right now. I don't know anything about that. Besides, a diary like this isn't proof of anything, is it? My husband became defiant, leaning back in his chair with a confident attitude. You're right, this alone might not be decisive evidence. It could be dismissed as my mother's delusion. See? I told you so. As expected, you're a woman who understands, he said, nodding and laughing through his nose as if mocking me. Then how about this? I started a video on my smartphone and showed it to my husband. Pete, who had been smirking with a relaxed expression until now, was at a loss for words. How do you explain this? Don't just sit there silently, answer me. What was displayed was footage from a camera hidden in the living room of my mother's house. On the last page of my mother's diary, it was written, Pete's demands are escalating, and I'm feeling it's getting dangerous. If I can get video evidence, I'll take it and tell my daughter everything. It seems that my technophobe mother had bought a camera and asked an electronics store to install it for her. The video showed the two of them arguing over money lending, and then in the heat of the argument, my husband losing his temper and raising his hand against her, causing her to fall. After that, he panicked and carried her body towards the garden. When he returned to the living room alone, he took all the money from her wallet and even took her cell phone before fleeing. From that point on, the video only showed an empty living room. The culprit was my husband, Pete. I'm truly shocked that you would do something like this. But there's no way for you to escape now, I said, glaring at him with anger and contempt welling up from the bottom of my heart. However, he didn't flinch and instead started shouting. That damn old hag. Why did she have to leave something like this behind? Why did you extort money from my mother? Huh? Of course, it's because I have debts. It was to repay those. My husband was completely brazen, admitting it without any sign of remorse. Apparently, his irresponsible attitude towards money hadn't improved at all. Unable to stop spending beyond his means, he had accumulated debts. I had to contribute to our household expenses after getting married, but I also had debts to repay. I was troubled too, you know. This was also why he had used our joint savings without permission. You pretended to be responsible in front of me, but behind my back, you were doing such things. Well, I had to act like a decent husband, or you said you'd divorce me. If that happened, I wouldn't be able to squeeze money out of your mother, right? That old hag was surprisingly hoarding money. Being a single mother doesn't mean you're poor, you know. When my husband started going to check on my mother on my behalf, he had secretly looked at her bank book that happened to be lying around. My mother wasn't the type to live luxuriously, so she must have been saving bit by bit from her small salary for emergencies. My husband must have grinned when he saw the amount, thinking, I can use this. At first, she lent me money right away, but from the second time on, she started hesitating, saying something about treatment costs. So you used me as a shield to threaten her. That's so dirty. It's touching, isn't it? saying her daughter's happiness is more important. Is this what they call a parent's love? He grinned at me, but his face was utterly detestable. My husband might not have any sense of guilt at all. Even so, you didn't have to take her life. Oh, that was just an accident. I didn't intend for that to happen. But when I hit her a bit too hard, she fell and wasn't breathing. I thought it would be trouble if she rotted inside the house, so I went out of my way to bury her in the soil. He spewed out words that made me wonder if he had any human feelings at all. Thinking about my mother's feelings, I couldn't stop my tears from flowing. However, I couldn't give up here. To clear my mother's regrets, I had to reveal the truth and turn him over to the police. So you were the one pretending to be my mother in those emails? Ah, yes. It was my way of consideration, you know. I thought you'd feel like you had more time with your mother. I don't need that kind of consideration. He had thrown away my mother's cell phone after I contacted him about finding her. There was no need to hold back anymore with this man. I'm going to report this to the police now. With all the evidence gathered, your crime will undoubtedly be judged. I wonder how many years you'll get. Hey, you're joking, right? I never intended to kill her in the first place. This was just a sad accident that happened. If that's the case, my mother might have been saved if you had called an ambulance right away. Your crime is grave for not doing that and instead doing what you did. Wait a minute. Please, not the police. We're husband and wife, aren't we? My husband suddenly changed his tune and started pleading with me. Did he really think I would choose not to report him in this situation? We're no longer husband and wife after you tormented my dear mother. We're getting a divorce. I declared our divorce and pushed away my clinging husband. He then slammed the table again and stood up. You bitch, don't mess with me. Pete seemed to have forgotten we were in a cafe and came at me with a loud voice. However, it ended abruptly as he grabbed my clothes. Several people in the cafe restrained him. Stop it. Let go of me. Allison, do something about these people. He cried out, begging me for help. Reflect deeply on what you've done and spend your life making amends. As I said this to him, I could hear police sirens in the distance. It seemed the cafe staff had called the police, and Pete was taken away by them. Our divorce was finalized, and through a lawyer, I claimed $30,000 in damages. My husband was arrested for this incident. His selfish crimes were severe, and he's likely to spend a considerable time in prison. I wonder if I've managed to clear some of my mother's regrets. I thought about this while looking up at the clear sky. From now on, I'm determined to live my life in a way that won't shame my mother in heaven. I've disciplined our daughter. Those were the words my husband proudly declared when I called to check on him while he was babysitting our 2-year-old daughter. What do you mean? He went on to explain that because she wouldn't stop crying, he had locked her out on the balcony. And then, if you can believe it, he'd gone off to play golf. We live on the 10th floor of an apartment building. I felt the blood drain from my face. That evening, when my husband returned home, he was in for a hellish surprise. Our daughter wasn't on the balcony, and when he peered over the railing, he saw the ground below stained a deep red. I met my husband, Tyler, through a mutual friend. He was 10 years my senior, but I was drawn to his seemingly nurturing nature. Tyler treated me like I was precious, and our relationship progressed smoothly from dating to marriage. Being with him was the happiest event of my life up to that point, and I never doubted that this happiness would continue. But that bliss was short-lived. A few months after we got married, Tyler started spending less and less time at home, always citing work as the reason. He'd come home after midnight every night, and sometimes he wouldn't come home for days without so much as a phone call. I knew from our dating days that being the president of his own company was demanding. But before we were married, he'd frequently ask me out on dates and was the type to send messages often, even when busy. So, I couldn't help but feel the stark difference after our marriage. However, at Tyler's request, I had quit my job as a nurse to become a full-time housewife when we got married. Because of this, I couldn't bring myself to complain to him when he was working so hard. Then, unexpectedly, I found out I was pregnant. The tiny life growing inside me, conceived with the husband I loved so dearly, was incredibly precious. Thoughts of our soon-to-be-born child helped ease my loneliness. Some time passed, and I safely gave birth to our daughter, Olivia. While I was overjoyed with our beautiful baby girl, Tyler's lifestyle remained unchanged. Him not being home due to work had become the norm, and on the rare occasions he was home, he'd either be sleeping in the bedroom or lounging around with his smartphone, never bothering to interact with or care for our daughter. To top it off, he'd leave me and Olivia behind on weekends to go golfing, his favorite hobby. Before we were married, my husband had said he loved children and was looking forward to raising them together, but his behavior now showed no signs of that enthusiasm. My parents lived far away, so I couldn't easily rely on them for help. I was struggling through first-time motherhood all alone. Not only that, but my husband was gradually becoming more domineering. He became particular about housework, our daughter's education, and discipline, demanding that I be the perfect wife and mother. "Is this all you've made for dinner? There's not enough variety." Tyler would complain about the meal I'd prepared when he came home late at night. "I'm sorry, but it's frustrating when you don't tell me what time you'll be home, or even if you're coming home at all. I'm sleep-deprived from Olivia's night crying, so I'd like to go to bed early when I can. Is that any way to talk to the man who's working to support you? Who do you think puts food on the table? You're at home all day, so taking care of the child, the house, and supporting your husband are the least you can do. Got it?" My frustrations with my husband were mounting, but voicing them only led to him yelling and shutting me down. I tried to convince myself that enduring this and maintaining peace in our home was for Olivia's sake. There were days when I felt like I couldn't go on, but seeing my daughter's sweet smile gave me the strength to keep pushing forward. However, an incident occurred that made me fear I might not be able to continue this daily struggle. When Olivia was about 2 years old, I had a routine health checkup where they found something abnormal. When I rushed to the hospital, they told me, "We can't say anything definitive without more detailed tests, so you should have a thorough examination. I made an appointment for the following week. However, the examination would take all day, and I couldn't bring my 2-year-old daughter with me. I tried to arrange temporary childcare or a babysitter, but it was too last minute, and they were all fully booked. My mother was elderly and not in good health, so I couldn't ask her to come all the way to our house to look after Olivia. As I was racking my brain trying to figure out what to do, Tyler surprisingly said, "I guess I'll have to look after our daughter." I was shocked that my husband would offer such a thing, but I had an even bigger worry. Could Tyler really spend even just one day alone with Olivia? He had never once taken care of our daughter before, so I was extremely concerned. However, at that point, there was no other option, so I decided to trust him and leave Olivia in his care. On the day of my examination, I woke up early, wrote down instructions for taking care of our daughter in a way that even my husband could understand, prepared their meals, and made sure everything was perfectly set up. "Taking care of a kid is easy," Tyler said with a yawn, looking completely relaxed. I left for the hospital, feeling uneasy about leaving my daughter behind. Even during the examination, I couldn't stop worrying about Olivia. Did he change her diaper? Did he feed her properly? I was so preoccupied that I couldn't even focus on the fact that I might have a serious illness. When there was a break during the tests, I decided to call my husband to check on things. After several rings, Tyler finally picked up. "Is Olivia okay? Are you managing to take care of her?" "Everything's fine. I've disciplined her good." "What? What do you mean?" I immediately asked, not understanding what he was talking about. I thought I could just let the kid play by herself, but she wouldn't stop crying because of your bad parenting. So I taught her a lesson by locking her out on the balcony. My husband proudly told me this outrageous thing. "What are you thinking? We live on the 10th floor. You're overreacting. This is all because you haven't disciplined her properly." I had so many things I wanted to say to Tyler, but Olivia's safety was the top priority. "Bring Olivia back inside right now." "I can't. I'm out right now. I'm busy. Bye." My husband hung up without a hint of remorse. Hearing his words, I felt the blood drain from my face. I immediately halted the examination and rushed home in a taxi. "Please, let her be safe." When I arrived at our apartment, I opened the door with shaking hands. Stumbling down the hallway, I threw open the balcony window at the back of the living room. What I saw was my daughter in a terrible state. Seeing this, I decided to get revenge on my husband and put a certain plan into action. That evening, Tyler returned home. "Olivia must have learned her lesson by now," he said, carelessly humming as he opened the window. He seemed to be looking for our daughter, frantically glancing left and right. "Why? It can't be." Tyler fearfully leaned over the railing to look down. He then screamed and stumbled backward. My husband was visibly shaking, clearly in shock. "Well, I suppose it's time for me to make my appearance." I had been hiding in the kitchen, watching Tyler's reaction. "I'm home. Thanks for babysitting." I emerged in front of my husband, acting as if I had just returned. "Oh, you're back. It's terrible." Olivia might have fallen from the balcony. "What? You mean what you said on the phone earlier was serious?" I thought it must have been some kind of joke. According to him, there was a bright red stain on the ground directly below the balcony. I rushed out to the window to look. "Kaya!" When I screamed, Tyler broke out in a cold sweat and became even more flustered. "It's Olivia's fault for not listening to me at all. That's no excuse. What were you doing all this time?" "Well, I went out to play golf." "Are you kidding me? We need to call an ambulance right away." As I took out my phone from my pocket to dial 911, my husband shouted, "Stop," and snatched the phone away from me. "If you do that, it'll cause a huge commotion and everyone will find out. I'll be blamed. It's not my fault. This happened because your discipline is lacking. Figure out what to do yourself." He finally snapped and tried to shift the blame onto me. Even in a situation where our daughter's life could be in danger, he was only thinking about covering for himself. His attitude pushed me to my breaking point. "You're truly the worst. I've already saved Olivia long ago." "What? You mean you tricked me?" The truth is, when I rushed home after that phone call with Tyler, I found our daughter collapsed on the balcony. I scooped her up and rushed her to the hospital. After an examination, Olivia was diagnosed with dehydration and immediately admitted. If I hadn't cut my tests short, I shudder to think what might have happened. I wanted to see how my husband would react, so I had spread ketchup mixed with water on the ground below the balcony to make him think Olivia had fallen. Upon hearing my explanation, his face turned red with anger and he came at me. But I didn't flinch, glaring right back at him. "Do you have any right to be angry? You abandoned our daughter to go have fun, didn't you?" "What do you mean?" "You went on a golf date with Amanda, didn't you?" "Wait a minute. How did you?" To be honest, I had suspected my husband of cheating ever since shortly after our daughter was born, given how often he was away from home. Then, a certain person contacted me. She introduced herself as Amanda and said she worked at my husband's company. I started receiving persistent phone calls and messages from her saying, "Please break up with Tyler," which confirmed my suspicions about my husband's infidelity. I could have filed for divorce immediately if I wanted to, but our daughter was still very young at the time, so I felt I needed to prepare carefully. During this period, I had been gathering evidence of how terribly he had treated me and how utterly unhelpful he had been with childcare, all to ensure a favorable divorce settlement. Amanda kept trying to show me how lovey-dovey she and Tyler were. According to her, all those times I thought my husband was away for work were actually dates and trips with her. So, I assumed the errand he went out for after locking our daughter out was just another date with Amanda. Hearing my words, Tyler was clearly flustered, not knowing that Amanda had been in contact with me. "I have enough evidence of your affair. Please divorce me." I presented my husband with divorce papers, but he angrily refused, his face turning red. "Amanda is just a fling. It's ridiculous to divorce over something like that. And what about my social standing? I've been supporting you, so you should just shut up and do as I say. Tyler rattled off his one-sided arguments and started coming towards me. You can't seriously think such selfish reasoning will work. Besides, I'm going to report how you treated Olivia this time. I confronted my husband, staring him down. But he just smirked at me, as if mocking my words. Olivia ended up being fine, didn't she? She was just playing on the balcony by herself and felt unwell. That's all there is to it. There's no evidence that I did anything wrong. He declared this with a triumphant expression. Are you serious? Do you really think that after enduring your mistreatment all this time and diligently gathering evidence, I would slip up at the very end? I took something out of my pocket and showed it to my husband. When did you? After taking our daughter to the hospital, I had hidden a voice recorder in my pocket, wanting to get some decisive testimony from my husband. I had recorded everything from the moment he came home until this very instant. I'm planning to take this to the police. What you did to Olivia is a clear crime. Faced with my unwavering, stern attitude, my husband became visibly shaken, sweat beading on his forehead. Please, anything but that. I was wrong. I'm sorry for everything. His attitude changed completely from moments ago, and Tyler uttered words of apology for the first time. He got down on his knees, begging me to forgive him. However, even seeing my husband in such a state didn't shake my resolve. How could I possibly forgive you for putting our precious daughter in danger? You're a failure both as a husband and as a parent. I looked down at Tyler, rejecting him with those words, and left the house to go to the police, leaving him behind. Afterward, my husband was questioned, and based on the evidence I submitted, he was arrested. This incident was covered in local news and on social media, causing his company to lose all credibility and go bankrupt. Both Tyler and Amanda lost their jobs as a result. Through my lawyer, I finalized the divorce from my husband and demanded $120,000 for alimony due to his infidelity and child support. Furthermore, I sued Amanda, his mistress, for $20,000 in damages. Olivia was able to leave the hospital without any issues and is now living a healthy life. I also underwent a thorough medical examination and was relieved to be given a clean bill of health. I've since returned to work as a nurse, and I'm looking forward to living freely and happily with my daughter from now on. Mom. I turned around, startled by the voice, and saw a homeless person in tattered clothes. Unbelievably, it was my daughter who I thought had died. 6 months ago, my 16-year-old daughter had left for a study abroad program. But 2 weeks later, she supposedly died in an accident. I had been in a daze, shocked by the news. Finally, I had pulled myself together enough to visit her study abroad location. And there, I had this unexpected reunion. Overwhelmed with surprise and joy, I hugged my daughter while crying. However, what she told me was an unbelievable, shocking truth. My name is Ashley, and I'm 42 years old. I lived with my husband Daniel and our daughter Isabella. I was a full-time housewife, while Daniel worked as a salesman for a large trading company, traveling all over the world. Isabella was a sophomore in high school, studying hard to be recommended for a short-term study abroad program only available to one student in her grade. Isabella studying abroad. Staying in the country is good enough. Look at me. I'm successful without doing anything like that, Daniel said. But wouldn't experiencing a broader world overseas be a good experience? I replied. My husband frowned as soon as he heard me speak, disapproving of our daughter's plans. He had old-fashioned ideas and disliked women being active in society. In fact, I had quit my job to become a housewife when we got married because he strongly insisted on it. Besides, do you know how much it costs to study abroad? Airfare, tuition, living expenses. You're planning to pay for all of this with the money I earned, aren't you? I have no intention of wasting money like that. After hearing this from my husband, I was at a loss for words. Still, I continued trying to persuade him, desperate to make Isabella's dream come true. Then I'll earn the money for Isabella's study abroad. I'll work part-time and still take care of the house properly. I won't rely on your income. Is that all right? Please. Humph. A woman like you working part-time won't earn much. If you slack off on housework even a little, I'll make you quit right away. My husband sneered, but I had finally gotten his permission. From then on, I worked part-time every day, kept the house spotless, cooked perfect meals, and somehow managed to save up for our daughter's study abroad by cutting back on my own food expenses. Eventually, thanks to her efforts, Isabella was chosen as a member of the short-term study abroad program. Even my husband, albeit reluctantly, seemed to have come around to the idea of sending our daughter off. Mom, Dad, I'm off. And so our daughter left with a beaming smile and high spirits. However, tragedy struck suddenly. 2 weeks after our daughter had gone to France for her study abroad, my husband came home from work and rushed over to me with a pale face. Listen calmly. I just got a call from Isabella's school abroad. They said she died in an accident. The moment I heard those words, all strength left my body and my mind went blank. That can't be. It's a lie, right? I couldn't accept the reality and fainted from the shock. I ended up bedridden for several days due to poor health. For a while, I couldn't think about anything. It felt like I was in a dream. During that time, my husband left me behind and went to our daughter's study abroad location, but I was unable to even get up, so I was left behind. What happened to Isabella? I finally asked my husband about our daughter's situation when he returned home. However, his response was cold. I took care of everything. The funeral was held there too. What? You've already finished everything. What else could I do? You weren't in any state to handle it. The moment I heard my husband's words, I felt a hole open up in my heart, and at the same time, anger began to bubble up inside me. I couldn't be there for my daughter's final moments or say goodbye to her. Yet my husband didn't seem to care about my feelings, and he didn't even appear to be grieving. You could have at least contacted me before the funeral. Shut up. Stop lying around and do the housework. How can you talk like that? Isabella is dead now. Get rid of all her stuff. Since then, we stopped talking about our daughter. I couldn't understand how my husband could remain so calm. 6 months later, when I had finally started to come to terms with my feelings a little, I told my husband I was going on a trip with friends to refresh myself. Secretly, I headed to France. I wanted to lay flowers for my daughter at her study abroad location. So this is the town where she spent her time, I thought as I walked through the streets, lost in nostalgia. That's when it happened. Mom. Surprised by the voice calling me, I turned around and saw a homeless person in tattered clothes. For a moment, I was confused, but then I looked closely at the dirty face and realized with a start. Isabella. The girl, terribly thin with messy hair and in a pitiful state, was undoubtedly my daughter. Surprise and tears welled up all at once, and my heart started pounding fiercely. You're alive. In this state. What on earth happened? Mom, help me. Hearing her strained voice, I hugged her tightly. It was all his doing. Isabella, unable to even put strength into her body in my arms, started telling me something unbelievable. I could see deep hatred and despair in her eyes as she looked up at me. It's okay. You don't have to worry about anything anymore. I'll protect you now. I felt an intense flame of anger I had never experienced before burning inside me. Later, after returning to our country, I began preparations to take revenge on the person who had hurt my daughter. I thought she wouldn't find peace unless the culprit received a punishment fitting the crime. 2 weeks later, I was sitting across from my husband at a restaurant. It was his birthday. The candlelight on the table flickered gently, creating a special atmosphere. It's been a while since we've eaten out, just the two of us, he said. He had been in a good mood throughout the meal and let out a contented sigh after finishing dessert. This is your birthday present. Open it, I said, handing him a large book. Is this an album? Yes. I put together all our memories in one book. I smiled sweetly as my husband opened the album with great interest. Did you make this? It's amazing. Oh. There are even photos from before we got married. My husband's voice was unusually excited as he continued turning the pages. This is our wedding, and this is our honeymoon. His expression gradually softened as if recalling past memories. Is this when Isabella was born? Huh. However, as soon as he looked at the next page, his expression clouded over. I didn't miss this change and inwardly smirked. What's wrong? My husband turned pale, and beads of sweat appeared on his forehead. No wonder, because with each turn of the page, intimate photos of him with his mistress appeared one after another. Pictures of him enjoying meals with women other than me, walking hand in hand. These were photos of his affairs that I had painstakingly collected from the day I returned from France until today. My husband was clearly averting his gaze, seemingly trying to think of an excuse. Why are these here? More importantly, who is this woman? This is just a colleague. It's some kind of misunderstanding. Oh, really? You look awfully close for just colleagues. I calmly refuted his words. We're involved in the same project, so we often end up together. Even at this time, I was just listening to her work troubles. My husband, still thinking he could get away with it at this point, kept making excuses. I suppose if it was a serious consultation, you'd need to be in a private room, right? I calmly turned to the next page, where there was a large photo of my husband and his mistress entering a hotel. The blood drained further from my husband's face, and his mouth trembled. You're wearing your wedding ring in the photo, aren't you? Doesn't this woman know you're married? As I stared straight at my husband and pressed him with an icy cold voice, he finally seemed to give up. With tears welling up in his eyes, he gripped my hand tightly. I'll confess. After Isabella died, I went crazy and had an affair. It was just a moment of weakness. Please believe me. Indeed, the photos pasted in the album were all from after our daughter had gone. You must have been in pain too, losing our daughter. That's right. It felt like I'd lost an arm, and I wanted to escape reality. Misunderstanding that I was showing understanding, he quickly tried to match my tone. I whispered, "Such lies," to my husband and quietly took out my smartphone. Then who do you think took this video? Seeing it, he stared at the screen for a while with an expression that seemed to say he couldn't believe it. This is a video of you with her in France, isn't it? Were you on a business trip together? You must have been busy to have a date during that time. My husband, who had been dumbfounded for a while, suddenly seemed to have an idea and grabbed me with tremendous force. How long have you been watching me? Hiring a detective, I can't believe it. Taking advantage of being in a private room, my husband raised his voice. He deliberately made a loud noise by slamming the album on the table. But I didn't flinch. I'm going to call the person who took this video now, so let's talk, the three of us. Saying this, I made a phone call to a certain person. Don't be ridiculous. What are you planning to do by calling such a person? Are you enjoying cornering me? As he grew increasingly irritated, I calmly hung up the phone and waited for that moment to come. Everything will be clear now. A few seconds later, the door to the private room opened and a woman entered. Dad, it's been a while. Incredibly, it was our daughter, Isabella. Why are you here? You were supposed to be in France. Shocked, my husband almost let slip the biggest secret he had been hiding for 6 months. He immediately made a face that said, "Oh no," and fell silent, but I didn't miss it. That's right. Isabella was supposed to have died in France. Because of you. That's not true. My husband was trembling, holding his head in his hands. Faced with him, our daughter quietly began to speak. I was really surprised then. I never expected to encounter Dad's affair in my study abroad location. Shut up. Be quiet. But when you found out that I had taken that video just now, you were afraid your affair would be exposed. So. Enough already. He tried to silence Isabella several times, interrupting her words, but our daughter didn't stop. You took away my phone and wallet, and deliberately drove me far away in a car and abandoned me. Yes. This was the shocking truth I had heard from my daughter that day in France. The story about Isabella's death was all my husband's lie. I couldn't believe that my husband would do such a thing just to hide his affair. Isabella had set up her phone to automatically save data to the internet in case it was stolen. My husband seemed to think that taking away our daughter's phone would be enough, but I had managed to retrieve all the evidence. Isabella didn't die in an accident. You put her through something terrible. That's a misunderstanding. Right, Isabella? Help me out here. He spread his arms like a father, trying to hug our daughter, but she strongly pushed his hands away. Back then, I begged for help many times, didn't I? Weren't you the one who ignored that? Our daughter said that after that, she walked for days to return to where her study abroad school was, only to find that my husband had already completed her withdrawal procedures and cleared out her dormitory. Isabella, whose French wasn't that good yet, had no close friends or anyone to consult with. Not knowing what to do, she sat dazed in a park until a kind homeless woman helped her, and she managed to survive until meeting me. I can't think of you as my father anymore. I'll never forgive you. Isabella, who had survived the 6 months until reuniting with me with a strong determination to return home, glared sharply at my husband. That's why it's a misunderstanding. If we talk, you'll understand. Are you still going to play innocent? Let's have the police judge whether it's a misunderstanding or not. I'm smarter than you too. I'll escape using any means necessary. His emotions running high, he seemed to have forgotten he was in a restaurant and started yelling and throwing spoons and forks at me. No, with this much clear evidence, it'll be fine. What can you, who've only worked part-time and know nothing of the world, possibly do? Hearing these words, I remembered. The real reason I wanted to support our daughter's study abroad. Every day, being belittled by my husband saying, "What would a housewife like you understand?" I wanted our daughter to see the wider world in my place. I realized I had been projecting my own dreams onto her. Don't underestimate me. I clenched my fist and glared sharply at my husband. As if overwhelmed by this atmosphere, he stopped moving, and at that moment, the sound of police sirens could be heard in the distance. Actually, before calling Isabella into the room, I had asked her to notify the police. Well, it looks like your escort has arrived. Let's continue this conversation at the police station. You're kidding, right? Did you really call the police? Are you trying to make your own husband a criminal? I'm divorcing you, so it doesn't matter what happens to you. Wait a minute. I was wrong. I'll change from now on. So please don't say we're separating. And let's forget about the police. I silently brushed off my husband, who was clinging to me and crying. He then tried to cling to our daughter, but of course, she rejected him. Having given up, he collapsed to his knees on the spot. Afterwards, my husband received a prison sentence for endangering our underage daughter and was fired from his company with disciplinary action. I divorced him and demanded $20,000 in compensation. I also demanded $10,000 from his mistress. Their relationship quickly spread throughout the company, and it seems the mistress found it difficult to stay there. After completing her payment to me, she soon quit the company and left my ex-husband's side. My ex-husband was cut off by his parents and had nowhere to go, and I hear he's now homeless. Isabella returned to her studies in France and began walking towards her dreams again. And I, too, was able to find a new job. Isabella's attitude of trying to see the world with a broad perspective gave me courage. Now I'm busy for myself, but my days are fulfilling.
I was 36 years old when I found the letter that destroyed everything I thought I knew about my family. It was yellowed and brittle, hidden between the pages of my grandmother's Bible, a place sacred enough that no one would dare disturb it, yet accessible enough to be found by the right person at the right time. That person apparently was me. My name is Eleanor Winters, and until that rainy Tuesday afternoon in April, I was the chief archivist at the Westbrook Historical Society, a position I had held with quiet pride for nearly a decade. My job was to preserve the stories of others, to catalog and protect the fragments of lives long past. I never expected to uncover a secret that would rewrite my own history. Eleanor, are you still here? Martin's voice echoed through the empty museum halls. As the director, he was accustomed to finding me working late, surrounded by documents long after everyone else had gone home. In the storage room, I called back, carefully placing my grandmother's Bible into an acid-free box. I had brought it in to properly preserve it after finding it while clearing out her house. She had passed away 3 months earlier at 92, leaving me as the last of the Winters line, or so I had believed. Martin appeared in the doorway, his bow tie slightly askew as always. It's almost 8. Even dedicated archivists need to eat dinner. I held up the letter, my hand trembling slightly. I found something. In my grandmother's Bible. Family recipe? Secret romance? He smiled, then noticed my expression. Eleanor, what is it? A letter from my grandmother to someone named Clara Bennett, dated June 4, 1956. I swallowed hard. It's about a baby, my mother, I think. Except what? Except my grandmother wasn't supposed to have given birth to my mother. She adopted her. That's what I've been told my entire life. I looked up at Martin, the museum's dim emergency lights casting shadows across his concerned face. This letter suggests otherwise. It says, the baby is healthy and beautiful. No one will ever know she isn't Lawrence's. Your sacrifice has saved us all. Martin pulled up a chair beside me. Are you saying? I'm saying my grandmother had an affair, got pregnant, and then convinced her best friend to pretend the baby, my mother, was hers. Then she and my grandfather adopted their own biological grandchild and raised her as their daughter. The words sounded absurd as I said them, like the plot of a melodramatic novel rather than my family history. That's quite a revelation, Martin said carefully. What will you do? I folded the letter along its well-worn creases. What I always do. Research. There's more to this story, and if there's one thing I know how to do, it's follow a historical paper trail. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I spread my grandmother's papers across my dining room table. Birth certificates, marriage licenses, photographs, journals, all the materials I had collected after her death but had been too grief-stricken to properly examine. With trained eyes, I began to see the inconsistencies I had missed before. Dates that didn't quite align, unexplained gaps in correspondence, photographs where my grandmother's smile seemed forced. By morning, I had formulated a hypothesis and a research plan. If Clara Bennett had pretended to be pregnant while my grandmother actually was, there would be records, doctor's visits, hospital stays, perhaps even newspaper announcements. And if Clara had then given her baby to my grandparents to raise, there would be adoption papers. For the first time in my career, I called in sick to the museum. This was personal research that couldn't wait. The county records office was housed in a brutalist concrete building that always reminded me of a mausoleum, fitting perhaps for an institution that preserved the official documentation of lives no longer lived. I knew the clerk well, having spent countless hours researching local families for museum exhibits. Birth records for Clara Bennett, he repeated, peering at me over his glasses. That's going back a ways. And it's not related to a museum project. Family research, I said, the half-truth bitter on my tongue. My grandmother mentioned a Clara Bennett as an old friend. I'm trying to piece together some family history. 3 hours later, I had my answer, or at least part of it. There was no record of Clara Bennett giving birth in 1956. There was, however, a marriage certificate for Clara Bennett and George Carter dated 1955, and a death certificate for Clara Carter dated December 1956, cause of death, hemorrhage following childbirth. My hands shook as I requested the birth certificate for the Carter baby. When it arrived, the name listed was simply Baby Girl Carter, with no first name recorded. Father, George Carter. Mother, Clara Carter, née Bennett. Was the baby adopted? I asked the clerk. Would those records be available? He shook his head. Adoption records from that era are sealed unless you're directly involved. You'd need a court order or consent from the adoptee. I thanked him and left, my mind racing. If Clara had died in childbirth, she couldn't have been the woman who pretended to be pregnant with my mother. And if there was no record of my grandmother giving birth that year, the next logical step was to find George Carter. It took 2 weeks of determined research, but I finally located him in a retirement community 50 miles away. At 89, George Carter was still sharp-minded, though his body was frail. When I called to request a meeting, explaining only that I was researching Clara Bennett's family connections, he agreed immediately. Not many people remember Clara anymore, he said, his voice wavering over the phone. I'd be happy to talk about her. The retirement community was pleasant, with wide hallways and abundant natural light. George waited for me in a common area, a photo album open on the table before him. He was thin and stooped, with liver-spotted hands and clear blue eyes that reminded me, with a jolt, of my own. Mr. Carter, I began after we'd exchanged pleasantries. Thank you for meeting with me. As I mentioned, I'm researching Clara Bennett, your first wife. Clara, he said softly, touching a black and white photograph of a smiling young woman with dark hair. The love of my life, even after all these years. I understand she died in childbirth, I said gently. I'm very sorry. He nodded, grief still evident in his expression decades later. It was sudden. Complications no one expected. One moment we were celebrating the birth of our daughter, and the next. He trailed off, then regained his composure. But you didn't come here to listen to an old man's sorrows. What do you want to know about Clara? I hesitated, uncertain how to broach the subject delicately. I'm interested in what happened to your daughter. His expression changed, becoming guarded. Why would you be asking about that? I took a deep breath and placed my grandmother's letter on the table between us. Because I found this. It was written by my grandmother, Margaret Winters, to Clara. It suggests some sort of arrangement involving a baby. George stared at the letter for a long moment, then looked up at me, really seeing me for the first time. You have her eyes, he said quietly. Clara's eyes. What are you saying? I whispered though I already knew. Margaret and Clara were best friends since childhood, he began, closing the photo album. When Clara found out she was expecting, Margaret was the first person she told. They shared everything. He paused, collecting his thoughts. Around the same time, Margaret discovered she was pregnant too. The timing was significant. Because the baby wasn't her husband's, I supplied. George nodded. Lawrence Winters was overseas with the military. Margaret had formed an attachment with someone else. When Lawrence returned unexpectedly, she knew her indiscretion would be discovered once the baby arrived. The timing wouldn't work. So what happened? I pressed, though the outline of the story was becoming horrifyingly clear. Clara offered a solution. She would claim to be carrying twins. When the babies were born, she would keep one as her own, and Margaret would adopt the other, her biological child, claiming it was Clara's baby that they had adopted out of friendship after Clara found herself with 2 infants and a modest income. But Clara died, I said. Yes. His voice cracked. And in the confusion and grief that followed, Margaret took both babies, her own, as planned, and Clara's daughter as well. She and Lawrence adopted them both as supposed twins. They named them Rose and Elizabeth. The names hit me like a physical blow. Rose was my mother. Elizabeth was her twin sister, who had died in a car accident when they were 19, long before I was born. So my mother and her sister weren't actually twins. They weren't even related. No, George said. Rose was Margaret's biological daughter. Elizabeth was mine and Clara's. Did they know, my mother and Elizabeth? No, Margaret and Lawrence raised them as their own, as twins, as sisters in every way that mattered. Margaret always intended to tell them when they were old enough. But then Elizabeth died so young, and after that, he spread his hands. Margaret thought it would only cause pain to reveal the truth. And you? I couldn't keep the accusation from my voice. You just let my grandparents take your daughter. Pain flickered across his weathered face. I was shattered by Clara's death. I couldn't care for a newborn alone. Margaret promised to give Elizabeth a good home, to love her as her own. She swore I could be part of her life, and I was, as Uncle George, the family friend who sent birthday cards and Christmas gifts. Did my grandfather know? Lawrence? George shook his head. No. Margaret maintained the fiction that both girls were Clara's, and that they had adopted them after her death. Lawrence never questioned it. I sat back, trying to absorb everything. So my mother wasn't actually a Winters at all. No, George agreed. Biologically, Rose, your mother, was Margaret's child with a man named James Caldwell. He never knew about the pregnancy. He moved away, married someone else. Is he still alive? No, he died about 15 years ago. I nodded, feeling strangely numb. And Elizabeth, she was your daughter. My mother's twin was actually your child. Yes. George reached into his pocket and withdrew a worn photograph, handing it to me. It showed two teenage girls with their arms around each other, laughing at the camera. This is the last picture I have of them together, before Elizabeth's accident. I stared at the photo, at these two girls who had grown up believing they were twin sisters, when one was my biological grandmother's daughter and the other the daughter of the woman sitting across from me. They looked so happy, so unaware of the complex deception that had shaped their very existence. Why are you telling me all this now? I asked. You could have denied everything, claimed the letter was misinterpreted. George smiled sadly. Because you came looking for the truth. Because you have Clara's eyes. Because secrets like this poison families across generations. He reached out and covered my hand with his. And because I'm 89 years old, Eleanor, I've carried this secret for over 60 years. I'm tired. As I drove home, my mind swirled with implications. My mother had died believing she was someone she wasn't. I was not who I thought I was. The Winters name, which I had worn with such pride, wasn't even my biological heritage. At home, I spread the photographs across my dining room table again, seeing them with new eyes. There was my grandmother, Margaret, young and beautiful, her smile not forced but guilty. There was Uncle George, standing at the edge of family gatherings, watching Elizabeth, his daughter, grow up from a distance. There were my mother and her sister, inseparable until death, never knowing they weren't biological sisters at all. And there was me, the archivist, the preserver of stories, who had failed to read the silences and omissions in my own family narrative. 3 days later, I returned to work. Martin found me cataloging a collection of Civil War letters, my white-gloved hands moving with practiced precision. Are you okay? He asked. You seem different. I considered the question carefully. Was I okay? My entire understanding of my family history had been appended. The grandmother I had revered had carried out an elaborate deception. My mother had lived and died never knowing her true parentage, and somewhere in my genes ran the blood of a stranger named James Caldwell, not Lawrence Winters. I'm processing, I said finally. It turns out we're all unreliable narrators of our own histories. Did you find what you were looking for? Martin asked. I found more than I expected, I replied. I found that even the most carefully preserved archives can contain significant gaps. That evening, I drove back to the retirement community. George Carter was waiting for me, a small wooden box on his lap. These belong to Clara, he said, opening it to reveal a pearl necklace, a few letters, and a small diary. I think she would want her granddaughter to have them. Her granddaughter, I repeated, testing the words. Yes, George said firmly. Elizabeth was your aunt in every way that matters, which makes me, he trailed off, suddenly uncertain. Family, I finished for him. complicated, unexpected family. He smiled, relief evident in his expression. I never thought I'd have the chance to know Clara's family line. After Elizabeth died, I assumed that connection was lost forever. I sat beside him, and together we looked through Clara's belongings. This woman I had never known but whose best friend's secret had altered the course of my family forever. As George told me stories about Clara, her laugh, her love of poetry, her dream of traveling to Paris, I began to see the outlines of a new understanding of family, one that embraced the messy, complicated truth rather than the sanitized fiction my grandmother had created. 2 months later, the Westbrook Historical Society unveiled a new exhibit, Hidden Histories, The Untold Stories of Westbrook Families. Among the displays was a section on the Bennett Carter Winters connection, complete with photographs, letters, and a family tree showing the complex interweaving of these lives. "Are you sure about including your own family in the exhibit?" Martin had asked when I proposed it. "Yes," I had replied. "As archivists, we talk about the importance of preserving the past, of ensuring that stories aren't lost. But we rarely acknowledge how selective those preservations can be, how families curate their own narratives, deciding what to remember and what to forget." The night before the exhibit opened, I stood alone in the gallery, looking at the photographs of Margaret, Clara, Rose, and Elizabeth, the women whose choices and circumstances had shaped my existence in ways I was only beginning to understand. My grandmother had preserved a fiction she believed was necessary. Perhaps she was right. Perhaps the truth would have caused more pain than healing for my mother and Elizabeth. But as I stood there, surrounded by the evidence of lives complexly lived, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. As an archivist, I had dedicated my life to preserving the stories of others. Now I had uncovered and preserved the complicated truth of my own family. There was a certain symmetry to that, a rightness that transcended the shock and betrayal I had initially felt. George attended the opening of the exhibit, frail but determined, his eyes bright as he saw Clara's photograph displayed prominently, her story finally told. Visitors moved through the exhibit, murmuring about the unexpected connections, the secret adoptions, the hidden pregnancies, all the messy humanity that official records so often fail to capture. "Your grandmother would have hated this," George whispered to me, a hint of mischief in his voice. Probably, I agreed. But I think she also would have understood it. She was protecting people she loved. Now I'm honoring them, all of them, by telling their complete story. Later that night, at home, I opened Clara's diary for the first time. Her handwriting was delicate but determined, filling the pages with observations about her daily life, her hopes for her unborn child, her deep friendship with Margaret. On the final page she had written, "Life rarely gives us simple choices. Sometimes the best we can do is to act with love and trust that future generations will understand, even if they cannot forgive." I ran my fingers over the words, this message from a woman I had never known, but whose choices had rippled through time to shape my very existence. Clara couldn't have imagined that 60 years later, her best friend's granddaughter would read these words, seeking understanding for a deception that had defined 3 generations. In my professional life, I had always believed that archives existed to preserve the truth. Now I understood that they preserved a version of the truth, selected, curated, sometimes sanitized. The messy reality of human lives often existed in the spaces between official records, in the silences and omissions in the stories families told themselves. As an archivist, I had failed to read those silences in my own family history. As Eleanor Winters, or was it Eleanor Caldwell? Or perhaps Eleanor Carter, in honor of the grandfather I had discovered so late in life. I was learning to listen to them, to hear what remained unsaid, and to find peace in the complicated, imperfect truth. 6 months after discovering my grandmother's letter, I stood beside George Carter's hospital bed, holding his frail hand as he drifted in and out of consciousness. At 90, his body was finally failing him. "Clara," he murmured, his eyes opening slightly. "Clara, I've missed you." "It's Eleanor," I said gently, squeezing his hand. He smiled weakly. "I know, but you have her eyes." As his breathing slowed, I thought about the strange journey that had brought me here, to the bedside of a man who was both a stranger and family, linked to me through a complex web of secrets, choices, and consequences that spanned decades. "Thank you," I whispered as he slipped away, "for helping me find the truth." In the end, I realized that's what archives and families are supposed to do. Preserve what came before so that those who follow can understand their place in the continuing story. My grandmother had tried to rewrite history, believing she was protecting those she loved. But some stories insist on being told, emerging from forgotten Bibles and dusty photographs, demanding acknowledgement. As the newly appointed director of the Westbrook Historical Society, Martin had retired 2 weeks earlier. I had made it my mission to seek out these hidden narratives, to ensure that the archives we maintained reflected the messy, complicated reality of human lives, not just the sanitized versions families often prefer to remember. The last winters had become the first Carter in 3 generations, and in that transformation, I had found not just a new understanding of my past, but a clearer vision for my future, as an archivist, as a granddaughter, as a keeper of complicated truths. Some might call it betrayal, this public exposure of family secrets. I prefer to think of it as the highest form of remembrance, acknowledging those who came before us not as perfect figures in carefully curated photographs, but as real people who loved, erred, sacrificed, and did their imperfect best to protect what mattered most. In the archive of my own life, that understanding is perhaps the most valuable document of all.